All right. Well, welcome, folks. So I think everyone knows each other. Becky and Melanie, did you get to meet each other last time?
No, I was not on the last meeting, so very nice to meet you, but I did watch the recording, so I kind of feel like I met you a little bit, but nice
Yeah,
to more formally, officially meet you.
excellent. Well, it's nice to meet you as well.
Excellent. All right. So I thought we could start just to get the ball rolling before Carol takes over. If you could share, it's always nice to share a little something personal. People get to know you a little bit more, and then also something more toward the work. And I guess it can all hang together if you do it perfectly. We'll see if I do it perfectly. But in terms of forwarding the work, I thought each person could share one thing they wish OSEP would do differently to support inclusion of children with significant needs. So Natalie, I know you're just joining. I don't know how much that you heard, but as people introduce themselves, I'm going to have them share one thing you wish OSEP would do differently to support inclusion of children with significant needs. And you could pop, and what's a fun personal thing people could share? Kelsey, any thoughts?
Oh, you're so much better at coming up with these than I am.
Okay, well, I'm gonna say it's kind of a stupid one, but someone asked it the other day and I really enjoyed answering it for whatever reason. Your favorite app on your phone, or if you don't want to do that, your favorite appetizer. So you could go with technology or eating. So the questions are, on the personal side, your favorite app, on the work side specific to this work group, what's one thing you wish OSEP would do differently to support the inclusion of children with disabilities? So I'll kick things off to give people time. So I'm Jennifer Coffey. I lead the SPDIG program, and my favorite app, I might do both. My favorite app is my calendar that lives on my phone and my computer. Otherwise, I would have no idea what was next. It's really, really critical in my life. And my favorite appetizer, I like to make this vegan buffalo chicken dip. I love it, and people typically love it. And I feel it's like what's it called? On-ramp, like vegan thing that people might like and actually try it again. And then the thing I wish that OSEP would do differently about including children with disabilities, I would love for us to have a summit on this topic, because I feel like we're out of touch and haven't been keeping up and getting people working together on it. So that's a big thing. All right, who would like to go next?
I can jump in. Oh, well, let's fight. Let's arm wrestle for it, Natalie. I'm Becky Fogel. My official SPDIG title is co-coordinator with Natalie, who's also but my day job is as director of the Pennsylvania Training and Technical Assistance Network, way long name for Patton, in the eastern part of Pennsylvania. And we hold the work of the Pennsylvania SPDIG out of our office. So that's where that all ties in. My favorite app, personally, I have, and Natalie knows this, I have an obsession with growing orchids. So I have an app on my phone that allows me to place information about my collection. So I love that app. So it's not really a work thing, that's a personal thing. And then the appetizer piece, I have a lot of them, but two of my three sons are chefs. The other one can't boil water, but the third one, so my youngest was home for a few days, and he happened to be out with his friend hunting mushrooms. And he brought back about a half pound of chanterelle mushrooms, which we looked up are over $200 a pound to buy. And he made these crostini with a cream cheese herb thing with the chanterelle mushrooms on top. Oh my gosh, they were. Of course, that might be why my stomach is a little upset today, but we won't go into that. So I would see that. Now, from the OSEP perspective, I was really thinking, Jennifer, before you mentioned the summit idea, was, I don't know what this is, but some way that OSEP could help us at the state level to have a little bit of teeth into it, but it be a way that people don't know it's teeth for regulation and rules. Because, we feel so strongly that when we tell people, you got to do this because it's regulation, or like in our case in Pennsylvania, the Gaskin settlement, then it's like, oh, we're only doing this because of the Gaskin settlement, or things like that. So if we can find, and maybe a summit isn't a tool for that, some way that we can make people want to do it, not just because they have to. That's all I
Great.
got.
Thanks, Becky. I think Natalie, you were ready. Is that
Yeah,
right?
and since I can say she already introduced me. I'm the assistant director at Patton, co-coordinator. My favorite app on my phone would be my Peloton app. And I love Peloton yoga. I am a big fan. So yeah, I do it every day. And then I would say food wise, Becky knows this. I love wine. So charcuterie would be my probably favorite app because it goes well with wine. I'm going to the Finger Lakes next week. So my favorite thing to do. When it comes to what OSEP could do, I guess we were having a conversation earlier today, and it was a combined conversation between our equity initiative work and what we call our Helix Collaborative, which really is the work around the students with the most complex needs, what we're talking about here in this group. And our struggle, one thing we struggle with is that there's fiscal incentive to exclude students. So like they get money, like we have classrooms in our IUs, we've got programs, they get money for these programs. So how can we think creatively around fiscal incentives for inclusion? And for example, and one of our intermediate units having coordinators for that schools could still purchase this. It'd be fiscally appropriate, but we would have trained people who could help with the task rather than saying, oh, instead of that, we're going to put them in this building over here. I feel, and I know that's not really OSEP, but what can we think about that? Like through OSEP, like why is there this fiscal incentive just to separating kids? People are making money. So I don't know what that has to do with OSEP, but maybe it has to do with regulation or something.
Yeah, no, good. I can make lots of those connections. So
Okay.
brainstorm away. We can work it out. All right. Yeah, please.
Hi there, it's Melanie Upright. I am the lead for the Dynamic Impact Project with the Johns Hopkins University Center for Technology and Education. And I just am going to steal some words from Natalie, and forgive me, is it Tanya? Sorry about that. Last time, Natalie was talking about how when we bring people together from different perspectives, how, amazing creative things happen. And Tanya, you were sharing how inclusion is not charity, and that there's a benefit to everyone. I think for me, with OSEP is, the silo piece is just really a challenge. And I know that there are already efforts to kind of bridge that work, but I just would say if we can just keep putting that as it's a non-negotiable, like we're all just people, and we should not be separating, because you have a disability. So OSEP should be merging all of this together. That's my big dream. Now, my favorite app is YouTube. I adore it. I'm in it every day because I just can't get enough of what's happening in the world, and I love learning from people. So I'm on it all the time. So that's me.
Great. Melanie. Who's up?
I can go. My name is Tanya May, and I serve as the Assistant Superintendent of Special Education here in Washington. So I'm the Part B State Director. And I work very closely with SPDIG and the MTSS rollout here in Washington. So my favorite app on my phone, the one that I rely on probably most consistently, is Apple Music. I need music in order to function. So all the other things I'm doing with music in the background. My favorite appetizer are nachos, because what's better than an appetizer that can be a meal? So I love that. And then what I wish OSEP would do differently, I'm going to build off of what Melanie shared. I would like to see OSEP model, cross-agency collaboration that shows that inclusion and supporting this population is not on the shoulders of special education. We all have a role to play, and I think it would be so powerful if they modeled with the larger system how they were doing that.
Thanks, Tanya. Who else?
I want to go last, so I'm going to say Brittany.
I'm happy to go. I was trying to deduce what the prompt was because I joined the meeting late. So I hear app and app both having
App-
meaning, and then
app and
something
app
that
and
you would.
what OSEP you want OSEP to do differently.
Okay, so because I have minimal time and experience with OSEP, I can't answer that particular prompt quite yet. So I'm just going to refrain from that for now. But my favorite appetizer as far as food goes, I'll be honest with you, I'm so ill-equipped for this, but I really love wings, chicken wings. So that would be my favorite food appetizer. And I would definitely say that my Pandora app is used on a regular basis. And my husband and I have an account where we can steal the music from each other. So there's a constant battle back and forth, but I really like the unlimited version or whatever it is where there are no commercials.
Definitely. All right. So did we get everyone?
So I'm next.
Oh, sorry, Carol. Sorry.
That's okay. My favorite app is Salmon on Cucumbers with dill and capers. That's just my favorite app. Appetizer. My favorite app on my phone that I use every single day is Libby, because I listen to books on audio and I listen to them in the car. I listen to them before I go to sleep. And then, I wake up and I'm 10 chapters later, but that's okay. And what I'm going to share today is what I wish OSEP would do. And as part of that, Natalie, I'm going to address what you said. I'm a little familiar with the IUs in Pennsylvania. And we, Brittany and I, work with a district in Illinois that is like an IU. In Illinois, they have cooperatives. And this one cooperative we're working with is actively, they won't get rid of all of their separate programs, but switching around their services to be in schools supporting inclusion. And so we're training them on our systemic change approach so that they can work and change their service delivery model, which is, superintendent down from that district. But I'm going to share my screen, and because I'm in a district right now, Kelsey is going to help me know if there's any chats. Feel free to ask questions on the chat or shout out while I'm going. So let me share my screen now. Let's see. I think I'm sharing.
You are? Yep.
Okay, all right, is it coming up now yes, it is.
Yes.
Okay, great. So taking the conversation we had before about authentic access, thinking about inclusion, and in conversation with Jennifer, as we were talking, I mentioned the systems change work and Tom Bellamy, if any of you know who Tom Bellamy is, yes, you would, Tanya, in Washington. He was the OSEP or OSERS director at the time. And in the early 90s and in the Bush 1 administration, I think it was. And they promoted this priority as part of the grant system. So I only know this because Maryland applied for and was awarded a systems change grant, and it operated a lot like the SPDIGs in that state education agencies could apply. It was only open to SEAs, but usually in partnership with a nonprofit like us or a university. And there were several different kinds of grants, but the one that we applied for, the Systems Change Grant, which was 4 states, rolled out, I think it was between these years. We applied for and started our Systems Change project in Maryland in 1992. So I know it went up at least through 97, but by the time we were finished, the program was not continuing. And so some of the language that you'll see is related to the language of the time. And I found our 1992 Federal Register, where it put out the whole RFP, which was kind of exciting to do. And it was called Program for Children with Severe Disabilities. And then they had, as you see in Federal Registers, different priorities. So one priority was outreach, and they called it Outreach for Serving Children in Integrated Environments. Whoops. They use the term integrated and inclusive a little bit differently, and in different places. But this one was to create models for integrating children with, quote, severe disabilities within districts and schools, and it would be a district systemic model. Another priority was developing innovations for educating children with severe disabilities. And you see here it's in general ed classrooms. And this was specifically for research. So it was a call for research into what, how, and what the impact was of including children who had severe disabilities. And the language of that day generally included children with intellectual disability, children with autism were probably part of that group, but had a lower percentage were identified as autistic. The third was a social relationships research institute. And so this was to fund only one, a national research institute. And Jennifer, I have no idea who that was awarded to at that time. So that would have been a 5-year, like a technical assistance center, but they called it a research institute.
Yeah.
Does that ring a bell at all?
I'm still trying to do like background research since it goes beyond the time when we actually had anything, online. And nobody, everyone I've reached out to in my office can't remember or wasn't there. So it's a little bit of detective work, but I think we're going to figure it out. I bet Tom Bellamy knows. We should ask him. Oh, you're on mute. There you go.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, no, I can.
Yeah. Yeah, Tom was, I think he and several of the staff there, they were the ones who made this happen.
Yeah.
So then another priority was model in-service training, and this was the equivalent of personnel prep. And mostly universities would get them to create coursework. And so at that time, which is actually what brought me to my doctoral program, well, this is in service, but they also had a pre-service component. There were specifically personnel prep grants to universities to prepare future faculty in this topic with this population. And then the last priority was the statewide systems change, which is the grant that I applied for as a partner with the Maryland State Department of Education. I'm trying to think, Tanya, if Washington, they must have had one, but I don't remember who in Washington that would be. But it was specifically to enhance the capacity of states to serve this population. But what's important about the language, it said, and it was longer than this, but to move kids, to change the system from, they use the word segregated to integrated environments, because then the term inclusion was just kind of being recognized, because we always thought of, we integrated Black people into their mainstream. And so we were integrating kids with disabilities into the mainstream. So it was in the very early 90s, around the time that I was a part of this, that the term inclusion had new meaning. Now, I showed this data before, but I wanted to bring it back just to link it to the data related to children with intellectual disability, because we don't have significant cognitive disability as a category, which is generally thought of as kids with significantly impacted by autism, intellectual disability, traumatic brain injury, can be within that group. So this is showing at the tail end of the systems change and this category of funding, where we were as a country, and 10 years later, how much further we've come. And the ranking is what I mentioned last time, the ranking changed. So like Maryland, who had a systems change, went from being like a third from the bottom to a third from the top. And so if we looked at which states had the systems change projects, and no one wants to do that tracking, but I bet you would see the change in ranking be directly related to who was operating those systems change projects or the model demonstration sites. Now, in the same year, what we see is a big gap between the experience of children who have an intellectual disability and the whole population of disability, a huge gap in the extent to which they're participating in general ed. So this is a participation measure. It's not really an inclusion measure. But I looked at the data from back, I thought I had data before this, and I'm sure that if I could find the paper, I know I've got paper before 1997, but I couldn't find it when I was preparing this. But you can see, again, 97, 98 is toward the end of this period. But if you know or have experienced systemic change either at the district or state level, you'll know that change is going to take 5 to 10 years. You're not going to see significant change until usually a little after that time. And so what we see here is that in 97, 98, about it was 8% of children with intellectual disability were actually in general ed for 80% or more, compared to 2021, when it's looking like it's 40 overall, it's about 42%. And you'll see that before, almost everybody was in a self-contained class. And in this year, I don't know if you stacked all of those other ones against the inside regular ed, less than 40. Oh, you know what? That's less than 40%. I'm reading this backwards. I took this right out of the federal data. I think I have this wrong. I used the wrong set of data.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, sorry about that. I put them in the wrong categories. This blue one here is like, you'd have to switch these three around. I have the 80% should be over here. So that was my mistake.
Okay.
So this bar should be inside basically what we would call self-contained. So this middle one here is this self-contained, students in a self-contained class, versus this one over here are students who are included 80% or more. Sorry about that, but you get the idea. So what is the result of all this work, aside from the experiences of children with disabilities, significantly those with intellectual disabilities having much more time in general ed, although not enough nationally. One of the things that came out of these were quality indicators. So these are just a few of them. I mean, almost every project that I'm aware of ended up with some kind of measure of either, quote, best practice or quality practices, or some way that if it wasn't a checklist, it was a guide to help their districts and schools look at how were they including kids, and what did they need to work on. So Luana Meyer, who was in New York at that time, she developed quality indicators, and then she had them validated through research. Kleinert in Kentucky had quality indicators, and you see he's talking about moderate and severe handicaps. That was in 1990. Tim Fox in Vermont had best educational practices, and they ended up publishing this big document that had all kinds of indicators or best practices, and then also a guide to go with it. Diane Rindak was in Florida at the time, and her tool called the BPI, they ended up having one for the state level, the district level, and the school level. And they ended up, after the systems change work, developing an organization as a branch of the Florida State Department of Ed called FIN, the Florida Inclusion Network. And they were charged by legislation to administer the BPI every 3 years at the district and state level. So districts went in around, kind of like, you know, what you do with monitoring. Every 3 years, they'd have to administer it. They still do. I don't know how much impact it's made, but that was a legislative act. We in Maryland developed the quality indicators of inclusive schools. New Hampshire under Cheryl Jorgensen, again, quality indicators of inclusive ed. Now, many of the folks that are still around, and some of them like Luana Myers in New Zealand now, Diane Rendex in North Carolina. So folks have either moved or, they're retired, but many of them have since updated their, what they call quality indicators. For example, what's her name? Ann Halverson in California. She worked with June Downing, who has since passed away, but in California. And together they worked with the California State Department of Ed, and they updated theirs up through around the early 2000s. We have now another thing just to mention about the update. I think one of the things that I know we have recognized in our work and others goes back to what you said, Tanya, which is if you look at the indicators from, 40 years ago or 30 years ago, if you look at those indicators, they were all around, they might have had co-teaching collaboration in them, but it was a lot around being physically present in general ed classrooms, having IEPs that reflected, something. It was really a special ed set of quality indicators. And what we're seeing now is that recognition that inclusion is about being in general education. It's not about getting special ed service. You always were getting special ed service. We've got to look at how do we deliver special ed service collaboratively within general education. So like our quality indicators went from like maybe 3 categories of a 5-page checklist to a more complex and comprehensive look at what are we doing for interventions? What are administrators doing? Building administrators doing. So it's much more general ed driven with special ed services within that system, within a school building. The other thing that happened, and I put all this up here because I'm going to send Jennifer the PowerPoint and you all can get a copy. So don't worry about reading it. But I wanted you to at least get some of the references. These projects, especially the research projects, the model demo, and the systems change, resulted in a breadth of, research that was amazing. And they're still going on. Kathy G was also in California and involved in some of the systems change work. And she, I think it was in 2021 or 22, published another research article that had 30 pairs of kids with, I think they were, they may have been children who took the alternate assessment, had an intellectual disability. They were paired for gender, they're measured IQ because you have to do that, and other aspects. 30 were included and 30 were in self-contained classes. And when I say included, they were in general ed 80% or more, and found significant difference in their engagement in academic instruction, in their academic outcomes, social engagement. So these studies, you have 1994, 2002, 99, this one's in 2010, but a lot of them, these early studies really created the foundation for the why. Why are we doing this? Aside from the fact that the law says you may not remove a child solely because of the need for curriculum modifications, here's now all this research that tells us, and it matters, and it's better. And then there's some other research, less, but other research that talks about the benefits for children without disabilities. This is I just put this in. I haven't been able to get it yet because I don't have access to, oh yes, I do. I haven't downloaded the whole article yet, but this one by our University of Kansas colleagues really went into the large body of research, again, compiling it together that shows the benefits, particularly for children with intellectual and developmental disabilities. And it calls for, we need to be including those children, but you just saw the data, that was 21, 22 data. It's saying we're not doing it. So we have the law saying it, we have research saying it, we have all of these model practices. So I pulled off my shelf. These are all books from, really in the 90s. These are not current books. They're books I haven't given to Brittany. when she came on, I gave her a big stack and then I gave her another one. But these books all came out of, this is a Doug Fisher at that time, he, with Craig Kennedy, they did one for elementary, middle and high schools. And he's written extensively about it. This one, Lipsky and Gardner is a classic book, along with the Steinbeck book, to talk about the systemic nature of inclusion. So here we have, by 2000, we have research, we have how-to literature, and we have data saying we're still not doing this. So I just wanted to say that all we're talking about here really in the data is location. And the books are talking about this, how we get a sense of belonging, friendships, meaningful participation, and how we adapt the curriculum for learning grade level standards. So I put these in because this one is excellent. We're reading as a staff. This one I just found. I don't know who Linda Graham is, but this is a second edition. It's not even out yet. So I'm going to wait until I see what the contents are, but this might be my next go-to book. We'll see. And so I'm going to stop now and, ask you what you think the why is, given all of that. Why are we not including children with significant cognitive disabilities as much as we should?
I think
I'll
it's
get
gonna be some of
okay.
the same reasons that were still evident, and I wasn't in this role in the late 70s. I was actually a classroom teacher at that time, but I feel like there is still that divide, and I saw that, and I heard this on the recording of the previous meeting. There's still a disconnect between my kids and your kids, our kids and your kids. I do feel like there's been some improvements in that, but we're definitely not there. Sorry, I interrupted somebody else. I think it was Jennifer who was going to talk.
Yeah, no, I was just gonna say it's interesting because I certainly have a philosophical leaning in this area. I think a lot of people do. And my philosophical leaning is aligned with IDEA, right? The purpose statement in IDEA and the other aspects of it, just to for ease of understanding where I come from. But it is interesting to hear parents of children with disabilities who are not pushing toward some of, the people I've talked to recently, we're not pushing toward inclusion because they're very afraid that their kids aren't going to get what they need. So just to,
I think Jennifer, we see that a lot, and it is because their system has not created the environment for their children to feel or be successful.
yeah.
Anybody else want to add in here any other whys? You think that why aren't we including these children more? Whoops.
This is Tanya. I think it comes down to ableism. I think that when we say all means all, and it's such a catchphrase, I think there's an asterisk hidden at the end of that means except for this population. I'll give one example. We testified to our state legislature about our post-school outcomes, which in Washington, on the whole, for special ed are pretty solid and have remained steady, except when we dig into the post-school outcomes for this population. Right. And when we call that out and we share, there's a lot of sage nodding, well, yes, of course. Right. I think it's just that low expectations.
I was going to add to that. And you bring up systems, Carol, but it's systems at the state level. It's systems at the federal level, because we've developed systems that, silo everything. So when the system silos things, these kids are this label, these kids are this label, then the teachers who are, even our certification systems, you're certified to teach this kid, not this kid. So when we silo all of that, the teachers don't believe they have the skill set. They think it's something, you have to have a specialized skill set. Yeah. I'm not saying there aren't some areas you do, because obviously I couldn't teach someone sign language. So you do have to have a specialized skill set in some areas. But I think that those systems create a false reality.
You know, Natalie, you bring up a really good point, and I want to take this back to what you were saying before and about the IUs. I haven't really looked at Pennsylvania regulations lately. I have a while back. But many states have regulations that actually go beyond IDEA and create like these programs in the regulations or staffing ratios. Like the regulations don't have any of that. And once you have that, especially if a parent or a state attorney within the state reads it, they're thinking that that is correct. So for example, you have autism support programs, you have
Caseload.
right. Yeah, but you also have named programs as part of your state system.
Right.
Some states don't have any programs in any of their regulations, their literature, nothing. It may happen at the district level, but then that's locally driven. So when there are no programs at the state level with those staffing implications, because, you know, I was actually in your state in an IU and in a district, and they think that that is an absolute thing that you must do based on federal law. And it's not. So just to say, I'm in agreement with you. And so some state systems and some district systems. So along with what you said, I just want to identify some of the things that we have experienced that are barriers. It's fear that my kids, mine and yours, that my kids won't be successful when they're in with a teacher who doesn't know what they're doing, especially if I'm not there. Or I'm afraid of failing because I don't know how to teach algebra, or the general ed teacher is afraid that those kids will disrupt my kids. There's a lack of skills. Our universities are still not preparing educators to collaborate. And to the point, yes, we do have specialized skills that we need to bring together. Everybody won't do any, won't know everything, but the expectation for high expectations and collaboration and adapting curriculum together, I don't see happening. And then finally, people have their beliefs based on their experience. So if I'm in a district that has certain things, and that's where I've taught my whole life, then I think that is what it is. If I'm not connecting myself nationally or reading research, if I had a child with a disability or a family member who was excluded, but they did well in many ways, we may think, well, that was the right thing because it was fine for them. So our personal beliefs and experiences will get in the way. The organizational context, I'm going to regionalized programs within a district, the traditions of a community, the bargaining agreement. We know if you're a union district and the union or the association will not allow for collaborative planning time to be a requirement, districts may be stuck on how they get teachers to plan together. So we have a little bit of time here, and I thought that an answer to your question, Jennifer, well, I agree with Tanya about the cross-departmental collaboration. If there was funding that was comprehensive, like what we just saw on the initial slide with this whole 5 priorities under one program, all focused on this population, and perhaps to have it worded, of course, a little differently, and maybe have it be across departmental, that would be amazing.
Got it. Add it to the list.
So what,
Yeah.
Any other suggestions here?
Carol, this is Tanya. I thought I could share. We're really grappling with this here, and we have not figured it all out. It is still right. Like we have been working intensely on inclusionary practices, really seeing the needle move, except for this population, right? Same old story over and over again. So a couple things that we're doing, we're trying to connect our work intentionally to the ESSA work and the designation for supports. So we have almost $1 million from our special education division going to our school improvement partners solely for incorporation of, thinking about inclusion in their school improvement plans and time, like staff time for coordination across general ed and special education. That's all they can use it for. Our state superintendent also asked me recently, could we totally think differently about special education funding? So what if we added a pot of money in addition to what districts get for special ed that can only be used if it's being drawn down to support inclusion? That's the only way, and it can only go to the general ed department. But if they don't use it, they lose it. So like, we're just trying to think of ways to incentivize beyond saying you have to do this.
Yeah, love it. Anyone else?
I have to say, Carol, that, I'm not long from being in a district, and one of the things that I find very interesting and somewhat pervasive is the lack of understanding of educational research among the professionals that are teaching. We're very tied to our curriculums. We're very tied to, like you said, the ways we've been doing things and our experiences, even when, educators call up to central office for guidance and we say what we need to say, there is a disbelief in it. And I think it is because they don't have a foundational schema to even understand that these concepts are founded in research, and you don't have to worry about this. You need to just push forward with figuring out how to do it. So it's interesting. And I'll say, the work that we're doing, Carol, systems change work, that's what that is. So when you dedicate that time to having teams really look for how do we make these solutions happen, it's amazing the ways that we can help move the needle. So I'm 100% in agreement with you that having this dedicated focus around, whether it's a financial incentive, it's really important, because I think there are these massive knowledge gaps. And so it's really hard for people to make those changes when they just don't know the things that they needed to know to be able to make the change. So having collaborative groups do this work, I think, is a part of what would help.
Right. The thing that we've seen also is that when we first started this work, and heavily related to the systems change in the 90s, because it was funding focused on, quote, severe disabilities, that is who we looked at. But the act of including children who you thought should not be included, were not includable, and then being successful changed the system. And so if we only looked at, are we including kids with emotional disabilities, or not that they shouldn't be included, they should, or kids with a reading disability, we would stop there, because we would say, yes, we were successful, but they can't. But when you include kids who traditionally have been expected not to be included because their cognitive ability appears to be so different than everyone else, and oh my gosh, if we can include them, we can include everybody.
I love what you're saying. I love this whole conversation. It's fantastic. I'll just even add to it that when we set a goal to do that, and then we develop action steps, and we have a process to connect with those action steps every single month, the teams are able to take those incremental steps. Right now, it feels really huge. And I'll tell you, the pushback is large, because when we don't have the structures in place to really support a general education teacher in teaching a classroom with a diverse group of students, they are not quiet about it. They're very vocal, and without the support of an implementation team to really bolster the work, to really help be that space where people can come together and they can hear and talk about the complaints and the concerns and then problem solve around it, it becomes something that, folks say it's just too hard to do. So, that teaming, collaborative. So anyway.
Agreed.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Brittany, I don't know if you wanted to add anything from your experiences, because you have been, worked the last several years in trying to make systemic change.
I did make some notes in the chat just specific to people truly presuming competence both in adults and children. The lack of structures for the co-planning, co-instructing, co-assessing, and I mean, the belief of like the Holy Spirit of the special educator with their magic wand by the presence of their being in the classroom, that somehow specially designed instruction is happening versus legit specially designed instruction occurring.
Yeah. Hey, well, we do have,
Oh, I'm sorry.
go ahead. No, I was gonna say,
No,
we do
I was
have some
muted. I was trying to
minutes.
talk at the same
Oh.
time. Just a quick comment. I think one of the struggles that we have a really nice new system for facilitating discussions around access, belonging. It's a facilitated around students. But I think the challenge is schools are select to do that when everyone is really upset. When the parents are now pushing it, teachers are frustrated. If we could find a way to have these options for facilitated discussions around environmental change, universal design, looking at students' skill sets and helping them to determine what best meets their needs in a math classroom. If we could have that around students and it done it in a preventative manner, not when the parents are angry and the teachers are frustrated, we would have a much better, so that would be something I think that would be a nice OSEP kind of thing too, as I start to think about it. Our FAB process is what we call it.
We have 11 minutes, which we can, I can give back to you unless someone else would like to offer some suggestions or thoughts for the good of the group.
I would just say thank you for the thoughts. It's obviously we wouldn't be on this call if we weren't already committed to. So it is kind of preaching to the choir, but it's always good to continue to think about it and struggle with it a little bit, but thank you.
Yeah, I think my big thought, obviously there was so much conversation last time when Carol presented, and right now in OSEP, we have I always forget if it's E3 or 3E. I think it's 3E. But it's formed as transition, engage, empower, expect in some order. And so it's secondary transition, but you're thinking about the lifespan, about expectations, right? So I think it dovetails with what we're talking about. But I think there is good work, and we certainly have a National TA Center OSEP supports, and there's, it's not like we're not doing anything. It's just, I just wonder how we could exponentially grow the work by coming together and having a more national perspective on it. Our TA centers can only do so much, they only receive so much funding. And so I'm just wondering, so your ideas were very helpful. The group's ideas were very helpful. Certainly how Carol has got us thinking, right, about the past and what happened in the past and what that could mean for our future. So that's been helpful on my side. I just wanted to share that back with you all since you shared with me some of your ideas. Okay. Well, Carol, oh, go ahead.
I was gonna say it'd be great if OSEP did a little powwow. We could bring in some folks and just have a nice.
Right. My idea is, which I haven't shared with anyone in OSEP, by the way, but my idea, do you remember the RTI summit once upon a time? So at least Carol remembers it, but we brought and it was before I was at OSEP, but I read all the papers and helped with the aftermath of it because I was an intern right after it happened. And so it was researchers from all around the country. Maybe there were practitioners too, but I definitely remember the researchers and very different perspectives on what we wanted to do when it came to kids with learning disabilities, how we wanted to assess them. And so it was a meeting of the minds, and not all the minds were thinking the same way, but that made it more interesting. And then there was a journal, special journal edition from it, or issue from it, and the work continued from there. And so that's my thinking. So we'll see, but all the ideas that you just provided, I think, if we wrapped it up in an organized way, I think it could work. So anyways, that's my thinking. So Carol, thank you so much for spending 2 sessions helping us come together in our philosophies and our thinking. I think we do need to consider next steps with a group. I think at this point, I'm going to look back at what we said we were going to do in our purpose to practice efforts. Some of you weren't there for that, but basically we thought about what our purpose of a group was, and then all the way to what that would look like with our practices. And so I'll go back to that and see what our next sessions might be, and then put that out to you for your feedback, if that sounds good to everyone. All right. And thank you, Kelsey, for organizing us. Thank you again, Carol. And it's good to see you all. Have a great afternoon.
Bye-bye.
Have a great
Thanks.
summer, everyone.
Oh,
Thank